Okay, well, the
Surprise me.
most replayed section
Oh
is
no.
you ripping on trad climbers at the Chief and talking about like
Backing up my backups with backups.
exactly and how many racks you're like, oh, I took a rack, but I think Chris took 3 racks, and I just cracked up about that. And it made me want to ask you about just the scene of climbing back then, what bouldering was like, and what I don't know how big trad climbing was in the scene
Yeah.
back then.
I think unknowingly, that's, and then you bring that up and it brings a thought to my head. I think unknowingly, that's when bouldering took place. That's when like trad climbing was trad climbing and it was dope. But welcome trad climbing, we are bouldering. So it was like the bon voyage, like, and don't get me wrong, like still, I mean, trad climbing has had a resurgence, and people are doing doper trad climbs because they've been bouldering. But
100%, 100%.
so I think that was, without knowing that, and just in this conversation, that was just like, we're taking over now, guys. Thank you.
When you say you're taking over, like, was it more just that you're like, I mean, you guys were like a fringe. You guys were made fun of. Like, I feel like taking over is like that youth being not even taking over and just giving a middle finger to everyone that came before you.
Yeah. No, Josh, I'm only saying that now because after 25 years, I know the outcome. It's just like, if you bet on the Bulls, you're gonna win. You know what I mean? You would have not known during the game. But I think it panned out that way. I think life turned out that way. And we didn't even know what we were doing while we were doing it, but we still believed in our heart that we were doing something dope and cutting edge and different. That's in any industry, when you're getting made fun of and you're an idiot and you're an outcast because you think bigger than the game and what's current, the constraints or whatnot.
Obe Carrion, welcome to the pod,
Yo,
man.
what's up, Josh? Thank you for having me. Dopest climbing podcast host on the planet. You're on
Dude,
fire.
you said that before we clicked record, and I was like, wait, dude, I want you to tell everyone that this is the best. If you say it's the best podcast, it must be true. Thanks,
I don't.
man.
Yeah. Well.
Well, to prep to get me in the mood, I watched Rampage yesterday, which I'll just tell you, dopest bouldering flick on the planet. You like that little give and take there?
Not my favorite, but I mean, I'm actually watching it in the background right now on mute. So, but I'll take that. I mean, the consensus. It's the consensus. It is what it is.
Wait, what is your if Rampage is? I guess it's not. You're not allowed to say like, oh, dude, it's my favorite because I'm the freaking star. That's a little
Well,
weird.
co-host,
But,
co-host.
yeah, I mean, I just watch it. You and Chris are definitely the
Scotty
ones.
and Jordan. Scotty and Jordan.
Dude, I watched that so many times when I was a kid. It came out in, well, a kid. God, actually, I wasn't. I was like in my 20s in 1999.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's now on YouTube for free, which is a trip. It's been viewed like a million times.
Yeah.
And did you guys
Damn
have?
it.
Yeah. Tell me, you used to get royalties. What happened? Why did they put it on YouTube for free?
Josh. It's God. I mean, I think I used to get a quarter for every VHS CD that was sold. So I don't know, a million times 25 cents.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Where's it at? Okay. Well, at least it's given to the world. So
Yeah, I got bad
for
news.
inspiration.
What we did is we would buy the tape or the DVD, whatever. I don't even remember what they did back then. And then just one of us would buy it, and then we'd watch it over and over and over again. So I don't think each view would have counted. It was each tape, a little different.
Right. And yeah. So, I mean, I guess I would be making out now.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I just watched it. It was a trip down memory lane for me, probably really a trip down memory lane for you. And it actually really holds up to time because it really feels almost like bouldering now, where it's like a bunch of dudes like cruising around, having fun, being a little irreverent, making fun of each other, climbing hard blocks. Uh,
Yeah.
that was my first intro to you. Like when you look back at it now, like was that the vibe that you guys were going for,
You
or
know,
was it just how it was?
Josh, like we weren't trying to hit on anything. Uh, we just happen to have a camaraderie that we've created at Free Waco. And it was like undeniable. And, Josh getting more into film, it was like this, Free Waco was a win. Um, let's repeat it. Let's, run it back. In terms of when you say about how it's so much like climbing now, what I like to say is like, it's like roots, and then you're growing another plant, and then you take a little bit off of that plant and you grow another plant in another location. And then you take a little bit of that plant and you grow another plant. So I think we were fortunate, right time, right people, just growing like a plant.
I mean, that is the most fun stuff to just hear. Like, yeah, we picked up a camera because Josh Lowell made incredible films, like went on to make unbelievably good films, but also just those were the ones that set the tone. And
Yeah.
I always say this, man, where I don't think people realize how big an impact that kind of media has. Like you're like, okay, these are the roots, and then people build off of it. And that's what happens, man. It's like I watch, I'm like, I want to do that. Like that's what I want to do. And of course, though, I don't do what you guys do. I do it my own way, and other people do too.
Yeah.
And that springs up, the next generation.
I think what's also is like the courage to be able to do it. It's like it was like a test of concept with Free Waco. So it was kind of like a no-brainer, but it was still like a commitment. It was like still nobody's doing anything like that before. We didn't know what we were doing, man. We just got lucky.
Dude, so one note I have that I got asked about, so I was watching it, and something that I totally didn't remember but saw this time is you've got like golf clubs in a bunch of the scenes. Like, what are you doing with golf clubs? Like it was never addressed.
Practicing my swing. I've always been into golf. As soon as my younger brother Michael got into the high school golf team, it's ironic because I think there's a lot of similarities in golf and climbing. So, individual sport, it's very mental. I think climbing is doper, just because you're against nature. One could say you're against nature with the golf, but you have a club and a ball. But in climbing, it's just you and your hands and your feet. So a lot like surfing. It's like what was that philosopher or some guy that said like the best sports are like man against machine, man against nature. I don't know, man against rock. Something like that.
I'm all for it. I always feel like we have some kinship in climbing to surfing, maybe skiing.
Yeah.
I want to say, if I'm just gonna like put out there that sounds like, gosh, who was the writer who did The Sun Also Rises? Like this idea that there's only 3 sports. There's
that's the
mountain
who I'm
climbing.
Like, yeah,
okay.
That's who I'm trying to reference. But
Wait, hold on. Let me see if I can bust
it's
out.
Man against machine, man against nature, and man against man.
Okay. Yeah, I'm old now, and so now I'm looking at golfing.
You're old.
Dude, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
And I was surprised where I made fun of golfing because it's easy to make fun of golfing. And then I went and I was like, dude, this is just a pure mental sport. Like just,
it's tougher than climbing.
And then like connecting it to climbing, I was like, it's interesting how you clearly have the ability to like swing the club, have a good game. And then your next game is terrible. And you're like, what changed? Like, I'm not weaker or like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's everything to do with showing up and bringing your best self to each. Yeah. Your mental game. I like that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Well, I got to tell you, on YouTube, they let you know what the most replayed section of the film is, right? So you can click around.
There's like that hill.
And
I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, well, the
Surprise me.
most replayed section
Oh
is
no.
you ripping on trad climbers at the Chief and talking about like
Backing up my backups with backups.
exactly and how many racks are like, oh, I took a rack, but I think Chris took three racks, and I just cracked up about that. And it made me want to ask you about just the scene of climbing back then, what bouldering was like, and what I don't know how big trad climbing was in the scene
Yeah.
back then.
I think unknowingly that's and then you bring that up and it brings a thought to my head. I think unknowingly that's when bouldering took place. That's when like trad climbing was trad climbing and it was dope. But welcome trad climbing, we are bouldering. So it was like the bon voyage, like, and don't get me wrong, like still, I mean, trad climbing has had a resurgence, and keep people are doing doper trad climbs because they've been bouldering, but
100%. 100%.
so I think that was without knowing that, and just in this conversation, that was just like we're taking over now, guys. Thank you.
When you say you're taking over, like, was it more just that you're like, I mean, you guys were like a fringe. You guys were made fun of. Like, I feel like taking over is like that youth being not even taking over and just giving a middle finger to everyone that came before you.
Yeah, yeah. No, Josh, I'm only saying that now because after 25 years, I know the outcome. It's just like if you bet on the Bulls, you're gonna win. You know what I mean? You would have not known during the game, but I think it panned out that way. I think life turned out that way, um, and we didn't even know what we were doing while we were doing it, but we still believed in our heart that we were doing something dope and cutting edge and different. That's in any industry when you're getting made fun of and you're an idiot and you're an outcast because you think bigger than the game and what's current, the constraints or whatnot. You're just like, but we were lucky. So
So now, in hindsight, like you said, well, should have just bet on the Bulls, but you don't know that until you have hindsight.
yeah,
I'm just curious if when you guys were doing your thing, you said like the camaraderie was undeniable. You could feel like maybe some magic there, but like, did you guys realize how special that time was, or that would set off, that was the first root stock that would then, was there anything like in the air that you're like, holy shit, man, like, what we're doing is cool.
um, I yes, I feel like there was a element at that time where we were confident with ourselves. Like I said, it was, in reality, Rampage was Josh's third film. Josh comes from a film background, but if you're just talking about bouldering, yeah, we were names. We did some shit, and word got out a lot slower than it does to this day and age. So, if you show up in a magazine, and then if you show up in a magazine with a result, they used to have like the comp results, and then if you show up to a comp and you got your ass whooped, then it was for real. And, you know,
Yeah. Those magazine. I used to compete when I was a kid, and one time my name showed up, and I probably still have that page somewhere. That
yeah, that's awesome.
well, because that was like the thing, dude. Was the magazines were a big deal, and I
Yeah,
talked to Josh about this. Was kind of like that was that era, and then slowly kind of no one can read anymore. I don't know how to read. Just like show me a YouTube. That's what I want to see now.
yeah. But no, the magazines were dope. That was the "Hey mom" moment. Look, mom, look,
Yeah.
mom. Yeah, back then at least.
So bouldering, give the middle finger to the establishment before it, but like, why bouldering, man? Like, how'd you come into climbing? Like, it could have been totally something different, but how did you end up climbing, and why did you head towards that?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in PA, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and a lot of sense, Josh. Like, I feel like I didn't choose climbing. I felt like climbing chose me. You know, a lot of luck, a lot of luck. But yeah, growing up in Allentown, a climbing gym opened up 2 blocks away from my house. Um, I couldn't. I've been involved in climbing probably 33 years, something like that, since I've been 13.
Wow.
And I still have a hard time articulating why or how. I was interested. I was a strong minded kid. I wasn't an academic. Back then there was dirt bags and and you're just like a rough life and your minimalist life, and that worked for me. I was enjoying that. I got more praise at the climbing gym than at my house. Um yeah. I was raised by my grandmother, and she moved back to Puerto Rico when I was when I was 12 or 11 to 12, and that devastated me, so I think climbing took the place of my mama. So yeah.
It's crazy that you had a gym open just a few blocks from you, because people don't realize that there was only, I mean, I don't know, there was probably like 5 or 10 gyms in
In
America.
91, yeah, 91, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Lehigh Valley.
Yeah.
Had a lottery?
So I started going into the climbing gym maybe around that age too, maybe, 8 or 9. And something I remember, well, I just like lived there. I mean, like
Yeah.
I just freaking lived there. But you know what happened to me is that people were nice to me, or like people like showed, God, that's such a cliche. People showed me the ropes. They were like, "Oh, dude, you like this? Like,
Yeah.
let's do it." And
And it
that
was a
that
safe
was
space.
amazing.
And it was a safe space.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not be doing your chores, but your parents knew that you're at the climbing gym. You ain't acting up. I mean, at least with me, coming from Allentown, being an urban city and just kind of being a little, rough on the edges, I wasn't going to get into any trouble there.
So you never got in any trouble, Obi. You've never gotten into any trouble. You were just at the gym, straight as an arrow.
Well,
Uh,
this is a climbing podcast, so we can't speak about that.
well, so what was like, who took you under their wing? And then there's a big step to go from going to the climbing gym 2 blocks away from you to traveling around America with the dopest climbers. Help me connect those couple of
Well,
points.
we only got a couple hours, but yeah, I don't know. Like I had guys that were mentors. I had like Ralph Henderson, Eric Masters, who were just like, got to be like in their late 20s at that time. They weren't that much. They weren't old, and I was just there all the time, and they were going outside climbing, and college kids, John Doskis, just give me some shout outs, just how I got to where I'm at. Um, but yeah, I was just there all the time, and I was always down because I just didn't go to high school anymore. I just like quit high school at 11th grade after starting climbing like 8th grade.
Hmm.
I was just like, I don't want to be here. I want to be here. I'm, like I said, I was praised and I was loved and appreciated. And then I started getting good, you know, um, relatively good for, how it grows is that you're the dopest in the gym, and then you do a couple climbs outside, and then you're like the dopest. Then I turned into being a rope gun because these guys wanted to do some trad stuff or some sport stuff, but they couldn't put the draws up. So I'd be putting the draws up, and then, you lead into doing some climbing competitions, and
I remember climbing back then being pretty, you'd be in like a little small pond. You'd be like at your local gym. And then maybe you go and you travel for comps. It sounds like you had success early on, but what were some of those moments where you looked around, you're like, oh shit, these guys are good too? And then how'd you react to that?
that's when I started to get into the tri-state area, and that's when I kind of like met Ivan Green and Vadim Vindicor and Jason Kale, and I met Josh and Brett. I think the first couple of competition when I devoted my time to training for comps, I would always flash all the qualifiers. I'd fuck everybody up, and then I would fall off the first move in the finals. And Josh would be like, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's gonna mess up." But then I started the term, I started learning how to win. And then I started learning how to like be respected amongst my peers because you start doing some things that they're working at the same stuff. You just start real recognizes real at a certain point, and I think that's what's like where I was lucky, but I still yeah. So it's just like big fish, small pond, bigger pond, small fish, medium sized fish. big fish in that pond. Get to the next pond. I'm a medium-sized fish, bigger pond. So it's just kind of like,
I gotta ask you how you learned how to win. Like, and yeah, just like you gotta tell me. You said like, oh, I was lucky and stuff, but that's a big thing. That idea of not just having the potential, but figuring out how to make it happen when you
so
need to.
yeah. And I think it's not as one dimension like that. I think when I say winning, yes, I won my fair share of comps, but I think I was winning the respect of my peers. Um, and I think that's when you start to learn how to be comfortable in your own skin, that these guys that you respect who are whooping your ass, you're whooping their ass. Maybe not at this comp, but maybe outside, or you do something dope. Or so I think winning is like a general term and not specifically towards comps, but it's just like winning the respect of the people who I had a lot of respect for.
How do you make that transition from being a kid, like being around people that you had heard of or looked up to, and then being a peer? Like it's there's a mind shift there that is not just like you said. It's not just earned through being strong. There's like a confidence, and it's not an easy transition.
I think, yeah, it isn't an easy transition. I think, I shouldn't say I think. When I was younger, I was extremely confident, borderline cocky. So sometimes my ambition outweighs my talent. My ambition exceeds my talent, and that's like a little bit of like a cliche. That's like a saying in hip hop. You know, when you're a rapper, like you wanting to be the dopest, and you may be going against like people that are technically doper, but you just still believe. You know, you just
Dude, it sounds ridiculous, but I'm all about that. Like I just think that if you can't dream it, you can't do it. And so it's such a weird thing to tell people, to be ridiculously optimistic. Like be like, no, I am the best. I'm the best. Maybe not yet. Maybe I lost you, but I'm on my way. And like, but combining that with the humbleness of getting along with your peers and giving respect where it's due is
yeah.
like it's a important mix that you got to navigate on your way up.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of times where I'd be like, I'm going to whoop your ass in ISO. And then I get my ass whooped. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to whoop your ass next week. You know?
So Obi, dude, you're kind of famous in my head. Maybe this is just me, as being someone who brought a lot of emotion and intensity into your climbing. I always think about, well, there's two scenes I think about. I think
Oh,
about
man.
when you're doing deforestation in
Hmm.
Castle Rock, which is like, I don't know what ended up being somewhere around like a 9 or a 10, but a classic one. I went to school in Santa Cruz. I went to college there. And
Right.
so for me,
Right.
deforestation was
Yeah.
important. And you like yell your way through this last move. And then I also think about you on, I'm going to say
Flying Marcel.
flying Marcel, and
Yeah.
like you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And like, can you help me combine like what we're talking about before with like, I like that. Like, I like that intensity that you bring. And I always wanted to channel mine too, like talking to I usually do on sport climbs. I think it's funny seeing it on bouldering because
Right.
because you like have your buddies there. I do on
Right.
sport climbing when I'm
When you're
like
by yourself way up there and you're just
yeah,
like, yeah,
I'm like, you got this.
talking to
You
yourself.
got this.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. I was just always I'm a very emotional person, ups and downs, like a mother, like really. Um, I didn't realize that at that time, but it was a fuel. You know, it was fuel. Deforestation. I was just tired of Chris sending everything. You know what I mean? Like, like, yo, I'm dope too. I mean, I'm not Jordan, but you know, like I'm dope too. You know, and I think that was just like, I don't know if I got lucky. I just got into the moment. I just got into the space, but I was like prepping myself. I was doing it on purpose to give a really good go. And my scream from that was just like, "Don't let go, Obi." Classic. Don't let go. In my own head, just kind of sums it up. Like, we're here. This is our chance. This is our opportunity. I mean, he smoked me that whole day, but I got one. Um, and then Flying Marcel was a bit more. Flying Marcel was a little bit more of a process. Flying Marcel took me. That's where I learned to like project. I think it took me 5 days, and I'm talking like Josh, 8-hour days. Like one try, rest for 45 minutes. One try, rest for 45 minutes. Eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then at that time, it wasn't just about me. I had a really great support group of a really good mentor of mine, Jordan Mills, was there because I wanted to do that for him because he wanted to do it, and it was like a Fred Nicole. I think it's underrated. I think Fred gave it a V11, but I think it's more like harder than that. I mean, Babyface, if you guys are familiar, I mean, that's a pretty classic V7, and I think that's a hard V7.
It is a hard V7. Also fantastic, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 5-star. Mm-hmm. And then if you would say Babyface is a V9, I don't think anybody would bat an eye. Unless you're, maybe. But anyway, so it was, so those were just like, I was always driven on emotions, but I also suffered from them as well. So.
Did you get better over time? Like, I feel like you can't ever really change who you are. You can, but then you can kind of
work on it,
smooth the rough edges, or I don't know. Yeah. Like any tips or tricks for people who ride that roller coaster. But I will say, dude, it's kind of inherent to doing your best. Like, there's always going to be a roller coaster, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have any tips or tricks. Maybe, when I'm coaching, but in terms of, I just learned that I am who I am, and at that time I was raw, and I was appreciated and loved amongst my friends, and they handled me pretty well, ups and downs.
I kind of miss from that era, or maybe it's just because it's been a long time and I don't remember the other things, is I like the intensity. For me, bouldering and climbing was about trying really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not like that anymore, but there's definitely like more training, more conditions. Like, dude, in Rampage, the thing that isn't talked about is that it was fucking hot. It was like
super
like
hot.
You guys are in the middle of summer. Like, it was a bad call. That is not when you're supposed to climb your best. But like that. But that try hard, that stuff. Like, to me, that's what it was like as a kid. I didn't know about conditions really. We just like tried hard.
Yeah, and then when just go back to what you're saying, and then be confident within your skin to be able to be that expressive. Like yelling at a crag you look down upon. I remember being in Waco before Free Waco, and there was a pro woman climber at Better Eat Your Wheaties, and I'm yelling at myself and I'm failing, and she's like, "You need to chill out." I was like, "I need to fucking sack up and do this damn thing," and I ended up saying it this next go. And the woman, you'll know exactly who she is, but yeah, I mean, trying hard, it was just like that's when we learn that's when we learn how to try hard. Like, we were expressive, not zenned out. Well, Chris was, but he was still trying hard. He was a screamer.
Dude, Chris, I feel like Chris is famous for trying really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
Just in that moment, but maybe not once he comes off.
Yeah, it must be the Puerto Rican in him. But but yeah, I mean, I think trying hard. You gotta try. That's what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? You gotta try hard. If you're out here, you have something that you're working on, you gotta.
Yeah, what is that about? I still see it happen sometimes where people want to act like they're not trying hard. Maybe it's like not a hard grade or compared to other people.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know about you, but when I see someone put it all out there, whatever grade it may be, like that's attractive. You're like, oh, dude, you hung it out there. Like,
Yeah,
awesome. I love
yeah.
that. I love seeing that.
I love it when it's genuine. Also,
Of
like
course.
when there's
Yeah.
those guys that come in, those people that come in, and they're just like show, but like whatever. But I love to see. It doesn't matter what grade. I really enjoy seeing the genuine, and you can feel that energy.
Yeah.
You know when it's bullshit, and you know when it's dope. So yeah, celebrating that, it's important.
So you're just making fun of Chris for being Zen, and I think you joked with me earlier. You called yourself like the urban guy in the film, and I just want to ask more about you getting into, I don't know, yeah, nature, traveling when you grew up in the city. Like,
Yeah.
was that like a natural connection for you, or like,
No, I have to. I mean, it's interesting because before climbing, I have an uncle who's an outdoorsman. He wasn't living in Allentown; he was away, but we would get together every hunting season, and he would, I was like, had a mother and a stepdad, but my relationship with a male figure wasn't really there, and he served that spot. He filled that for me. So me being outside wasn't foreign because he would take me hunting even before I was able to go hunting. So I was always exposed to that, and that's like I appreciate that. Not a lot of people know that. And I am urban, and I did grow up urban. How I talked back then, and how I dressed, and my attitude, and f it, like whatever, dope this, get the fuck, listening to Jay-Z and Biggie, and and being Puerto Rican, so it fit the mold, But I think I was the urban guy because I was the urban guy. you know?
it was a fun juxtaposition, dude. Like, I don't know, like you were cool. You were the cool guy. I mean, of course, Chris is cool in a hippie set, or I don't know. I don't want to say he's a hip. Just he had his style and you had your
Yeah.
style. And dude, it makes me wonder when you started going outdoors and climbing. What did your friends say that were actually urban? Were they like, "What the hell are you doing, dude?"
Yeah. Yeah, I got dissed a lot, I got dissed being a rock climber and what is this? What the heck is this? My parents, when I said I want to be a rock climber, they didn't understand. They stopped by the gym a couple times and, but I did start climbing with another kid in the neighborhood who was super psyched on it. He probably climbed for like 2 years and got bored and did some other stuff. But yeah, I got made fun of. Like all the kids that I went to school with in high school and I grew up around, and what the freak is rock climbing, And now, it's it's funny when rock climbing comes up because it comes up quite often now that
Yeah, but now they think
it's
you're like
evolved.
Alex Honnold and you're like, risking your life. But I bet you it does help when you go and because I just remember people didn't know what climbing was at all when I was a kid. I grew up in a town that was like football and wrestling, maybe
Right.
baseball, like maybe. But I would go and I would climb and scare the shit out of myself, be run out. I was like, no, dude, what I'm doing is dope. Like, this is cool. I don't care what you
Yeah.
say. Like, let's see how you feel when you're, 15 feet above your bolt and you're
Right.
pumped. Like, we'll see how you are when you're like that. And so,
And we're not on Everest. We're not mountain climber. We're just a sheer, yeah. Explaining that would, yeah, back then it was really difficult explaining it to people that weren't exposed to it. Um, so yeah, I got a little bit of kickback or just like a little side eyes.
so when you told your parents you wanted to be a rock climber or just anyone around you and they said, well, what does that even mean? You, you did become a pro climber. When was that switch and what made you decide that, oh, maybe I could commit my life to this? And yeah, just take me through that moment. Cause that's a big difference from just starting climbing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, although I wasn't studious, I feel like I'm pretty intelligent and, I had like a lot of ambition. But the transition into being a pro climber, I think that's when I never came from the means to pay to do the traveling that I've done unless I was a climber. Climbing took me around the world a couple times, but I would have never. I didn't have a family background that would have supported that. But to make the transitions, I just freaking believed in myself. This is just what I wanted to do. I surrounded myself throughout my whole career with the best of the best, and fortunate and lucky for that. But even now, when I look back when I was a kid and at the gym was called Climb On, I was still surrounded. I was always surrounded around, I don't know, maybe guardian angels. uh, but yeah, who knows? I just freaking a lot of luck and a lot of ambition, a lot of luck. But you're just shaking your head. You're like, bullshit. There's more to it.
Well, I hear this. I've heard it from you. I've heard it from it was Felipe Camargo. You make me think of it. He's a young climber out of Brazil, and he just had all these stories about how, oh, I would climb and I'd meet someone, and then they would kind of like take me under their wing. I got really lucky, and they took me to Spain. I'm always like, yeah, dude, the common denominator is you, not luck.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. But also, if you're talking about somebody in Brazil, we consider that luck. Like if you really want to talk, like if our parents didn't do that for us. So when he says that, yeah, I got lucky and met some really cool people that took me to Spain, that's because he may not have had a mom and dad. I don't know his situation at all. I don't even know who he is, but I'm just saying, like, there's potential, like, if you grew up a little tough. So we always call it luck.
Yeah, I just
So,
I want to give you credit because I just feel like you don't accidentally like when you say that you've been around the best of the best in all facets of climbing. It's actually very true, and so it's kind of like it might be lucky the first time, it might be still lucky the second time, but after a while you go, okay, there's something going on, and you've really had your hands in a lot of different areas of climbing, not just being a pro climber and climbing hard, but there's been gyms, there's been design, there's been coaching, and so just want to give credit where credit's due.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I guess, yeah.
All right, well, take me back to going like what it meant to be pro back then, because it's a little different now. And yeah, when did you? I don't even know if what it means to like turn pro, especially back then. But when did you decide like I'm all in? And what did it look like actually boots on the ground when you quote unquote were all in? Quick break to tell you about today's sponsor. And just a reminder, I only partner with companies that are run by climbers. Today's partner is Mad Rock Climbing. Mad Rock is always at the cutting edge of climbing. They're known for innovation, and that's because they're climbers who keep pushing the limits of what is possible in gear technology. Like the drones. Everyone knows you have to have a pair of drones in your quiver because sometimes that heel makes it almost feel like cheating. Almost. If you want to hear more about the latest innovations going on there and what's coming next, be sure to check out episode number 147 with their CEO, Kenny Suh. It's a total banger. The other thing that drives Mad Rock is an ethos that climbing is for everybody. And that means making the best gear affordable. That's why Mad Rock has promised to keep their prices the same through at least the summer, despite the turmoil that tariffs have brought to the industry. They're not going to lower quality, reduce staff for their pay, or cut corners in any way. They're just going to take the hit so you don't have to. Like their founder Young Chu said, making good gear isn't hard. Making it affordable, that's the challenge. Go check them out now at madrock.com. Okay, back to the pod.
For me, it was a bit of blue collar work. I got to myself to a point where I did well enough, whether outside, inside comps, amongst my peers, to have a brand and a personality, had videos coming out, and then people genuinely interested in me and interesting what I had to say and taking my advice. And this was like a little bit of a precursor to my coaching. But, I had to work to go to the areas that I wasn't filming at, whether I was doing construction, cement work. And at a certain point where I gained a bit of acknowledgement, I did a lot of clinics. I'd hustle. I'd do clinics. I remember doing a series of clinics on the East Coast, and Paul Robinson came to one of my clinics, and like, you start connecting. Um, so I think back then the pro meant like you were getting paid a lot of money, and there was only, I mean, the only people that were really making, I shouldn't say, I'd talk about people's pockets, but it was like Lynn Hill, of course, um, Jerry, Ben, Chris, maybe Tommy. But to be a pro, I felt like, I, after reflecting, I think association with money and success, but I think in all true reality, it's like your connection with an audience and how you inspire them. And I think I was able to, at that time, unknowingly, I was able to piggyback off of the feel that I was involved in with making these videos and being at these climbing competitions, and somehow sharing that feel, that vibe with people at clinics. And when you go to a climbing competition and people are like, yo, Obi, I saw that video, and you're just like, yeah, dude, cool, man, what's your name, how you doing, like, what's going on, what's your project, what are you working on, like, what are we getting after, and um I think that's the true essence of being a pro. Back then, and even to this day, there's a lot of flash and a lot of surface, but like, if you want to be a pro, like, you kind of live forever.
What do you mean by live forever?
Well, like, the impact or what you have done, and like how you've influenced people, and time goes by, and yo, I learned this from Obe, or yo, check this out, like, I picked this up.
The two things I really that really stood out to me there is clinics that cracks me up because I remember so my home gym was the Rocknasium, which was in Davis, and I remember Jason Campbell coming through and doing a clinic. I want to say Nick Sagar came through, and remember Peter Croft,
Oh,
and
Peter,
like
yeah.
it was a big deal.
And it was interesting because I was exposed to that at a young age. I mean, Hans Florine came with a
Oh yeah,
buddy, and he did a clinic at the climbing gym I started at. And then Kurt Smith, I remember meeting Kurt Smith after he did Slice of Life.
big
And
deal.
yeah, man, he was fire, even with his mullet. But I remember skipping. I got out. I think I left school at 11 o'clock, and I'm like barreling into the climbing gym. I was like, yo, where's Kurt Smith? Yo, I want to meet that guy. And I walked right past him because I didn't realize how he's kind of small dude. But I walked to the back. The owner of the gym had me walk to the bathroom, and I was like, you're not Kurt Smith, man. But that was just me being naive, like a little 14-year-old or whatever. But I was like, yeah, I remember we had at that climbing gym, we had like this wall in the backyard, which was made out of gunite, like cement basically. And he taught me how to articulate my foot to do a certain move. That's just like a little key, like when you put your foot out there, you got to kind of like sometimes just get a little edge around a corner or something. But I was talking about this 2 months ago with some of the guys that coached where I work. But yeah, clinics, man. I think I mimicked a lot of the people before me.
This was something that I remember is so we'd go out climbing. So I was lucky I had mentors. They took me out climbing, but we would just be climbing together. Maybe they would show me how to be safe, but the idea of teaching each other technique or something, it didn't. And even when we did kind of like, we had like a team, Rocknasium team,
Right.
it's like, hey guys, we're all going to go on a run, and then we're going to set some routes and we're going to belay you on them. And then we're going to like stretch afterwards. But this concept of having Peter Croft like teach me what technique is, it was new.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like, it's crazy now because I feel that, now the coaching and the team is more for indoor, but the indoor climbing is so different. But the lessons that you learned back in those days I never was on a team, but those lessons that you learned indoor, really played into the outdoor game too. Like it was just like a different thing, you know. Now it's like Earth and Mars when it comes to climbing competitions. At least back in the day, it was Earth and Earth.
Well, back then, indoor climbing was very squarely in the arena of making you better for outdoor
For
climbing.
outdoor climbing.
There was
Yeah.
no
There
question
was no
about.
hiding. Yeah, there was no. It was straight up. That's what we're doing. We're getting better so we can red point our, you know, 12D, 12C.
Yeah, yeah. Warm up for kids these days. Uh, so doing construction, doing blue collar work. God, I remember a lot of people being nurses too. Like that was kind of par for the course of just putting in your time, saving up some money so you could travel when it was the cold season. And I mean, honestly, dude, that's like what a lot of my peers and friends do now. They're just not pro. It's just like that's their means of
Right.
chasing the chasing the winter when they can. Uh, and I just can you tell me?
Well,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
There's. I mean, there's pros and there's lifers, you know, and there's one in the same. But you know, those guys are lifers. You know, maybe it's not, and it takes a lot to be in the public eye or be, you know, seen or be vulnerable to be out there. You know, like it's a certain personality. You know, so lifers are still living the same. You know, they're still doing the same stuff that we were doing. They just choose not just to choose to be on the DL. You know, they just do their own. And there's plenty of crushers that the world will never know. And that's special too.
Tell me more what it was like being a known figure back then. Like yeah, what was that like all of a sudden? Because I'm sure you got recognized, dude. You stood out.
Yeah. It was awesome. It was like a sense of achievement. I felt like I felt like I was good. You know, I think it played a lot on me wanting to be successful. And I think a lot of the drive and a lot of the ambition was stemmed from that, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
of
but
course.
I feel like, you know, I feel like it was good. Stressful at a certain point, you know. Um, not trying to dive in too much, but like it's a big reason. Yeah, it all ties in on like me wanting to be dope, me being emotional, um, me being lucky.
I mean, young men, me included, want to be noticed, and that is there's a cycle there of driving your ambition, and then but then there's also that can be a lot of ups and downs because then you're like, okay, now I gotta deliver, and if you don't deliver, then your ego, like you're like, maybe I'm not who I thought it was, and then you can spiral downwards. I don't feel like there's any like easy answers there. I feel like that's kind of what it is to be wrestling with yourself and being on your way up when you're younger.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I wish I would have had a coach.
Dude, we talked about I think we talked about this before about coaching, but so I competed as a kid and I was good, and then I got second at nationals, and it broke my heart, and I cried like the 11-year-old boy I was, and it kind of stopped me from competing. And I wish someone had come along and just been like, dude, it's okay. You got second. Second's great. Like, come
Yeah,
back next year. And even if you get second, then you're having the black. This is okay. But boy, like when you're young, it's intense, dude. I don't know
yeah,
what else to say.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I think it's important to have someone, if you're fortunate enough to have someone that you trust and you to kind of bring you down to earth and explain, you know, how that works.
Well, you told me that this is how you can coach now, is that you have had the ups and the downs. And does that mean that part of being a coach is not even like, it's just being able to tell someone that, like, yeah, I've been there.
The way I've always, and you know, thinking about this earlier as we were prepping for this, you know, my grandmother was a teacher, my mom's an educator. I kind of maybe picked up some genetics from that, or I I put my feet in those kids' shoes, and they trust me because they know if I've worn my own shoes. um, so yeah, coaching came surprisingly natural to me because coaching kids, like said, there's a period in time that I'm associated with coaching kids, but I was doing clinics before that. I was teaching, you know what I mean? Um, but yeah, it came a point in time when with the climbing and the pressure and how do you maintain that, I struggled with it. So I like kind of like reinvented myself and stayed within climbing and say, hey, this is another facet of climbing that I can contribute to and still be me. I don't have to be, you know, the athlete anymore.
Well, that's something when that was the other thing I was going to say about being a professional is that, especially back then, being a professional kind of meant being in the industry full stop. And there wasn't a lot of room in the industry to even make a living. And so being a professional may have meant clinics, coaching. There was, yeah, you named the handful of people who may have been doing it off of just their sends, but boy, there was only room for just, yeah, maybe less than a handful.
Not even, not
Uh,
even. Yeah, there was. Yeah, those were, you know, the prodigies. And I mean, I only there's a lot of badass climbers out there, but I feel like less than a handful. There's only like three or four that are just like prodigies.
it's a tough game. It's,
Yeah.
well, so being a climber in general was more fringe back then, and now it's become a little different. Just like I remember it being a bit more wild. And I don't want to get you in trouble. You don't have to name any names or be explicit in stories, but if I remember correctly, maybe some of those comps led to wild parties. And yeah, like you feel like that's been lost, or maybe I'm just not invited to the parties anymore. Is what it really is.
Well, you probably started a little too late. If you're 11 years old taking second at nationals in 2019, what is it, 1999 or whatever, but um,
95, dude.
95. Okay, all right. So yeah,
It's just I wasn't
maybe
allowed to go to the parties because I was 11 years old.
right.
That would have been
Yeah,
not
there was
good
that
luck.
element of like like the cliche rock star. It was like you're gonna have a comp. It's a perform. It's a competitive competition. It's a performance, and then it's a party after. It was kind of like inviting people to your house and showing them a good time for the people that were putting the comps on, for the organizers.
Yeah.
And it just was like a part of it. Like if you got your ass whooped at the comp, at least you can go have a great party and have some stories from the party. um, and I don't even know. It just seemed like the perfect. At that time, we didn't consider ourselves athletes. We're not training. We weren't training the way the kids are training now. We don't have a conditioning coach, a climbing coach, a stretching coach. We don't have online. We didn't have online coaching. We didn't even have coaches. We were just kind of winging it ourselves, and it just seemed like a perfect way to kind of blow off steam and just kind of like celebrate. It was a celebration for what we just went through, what we just did.
Well, I also remember that there just wasn't really climbing competitions that they were these climbing competitions were often kind of one off. They were just something like I remember the Phoenix bouldering contest was this like outdoor thing with a big party afterwards. And like, if you won, it's like great, you got like a pair of shoes and like a rope or
Yeah,
something.
Jim
But
Jim
it
Jim Wall would give you like a box of Cliff Bars or some shit.
yes, dude. And it wasn't really associated with like, and I am number one and I am the best in the world right now. It's kind of like these little one off. And I don't know. I think there's some of that still going on, but it feels very different where now it's like, no, you going to, I don't know what it would be like World Cups,
Right.
like,
I don't even think they. I mean, I've been to a couple of World Cups, and I think they used to party. But we did the PCAs back in the early 2000s, and that was the best of the best. Like, I mean, Europe came a couple seasons. They were, I mean, Chris, he didn't win all of them. He got took to task by a couple of the Euros, and those guys showed up big time. And then they partied. But no, I remember partying after a couple World Cups. I remember being in France for a couple of World Cups. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
Oh God, I'm bummed that you're leaving it at that, but that's okay. So you know what's funny is those PCA videos of those comps have been kind of like making the rounds a little bit. Like
Yeah,
people enjoy it, and I was just wondering like what your take was on kind of like the style of setting back then and now competition climbing is different. Like how do you
yeah, it's
feel
more
watching?
refined.
Well, is it? I don't know. Like what do you think like watching that stuff and then how it is now?
Well, okay, so there's two different things. So the setting back then, the route setters wanted to get the climber. Like the climbers back then, they wanted to stop Chris. They weren't trying to put a podium up that's like a nice spread of like success and zones and yada yada yada. Now they're doing a better job of it, but what I don't like, and this is just strictly because I'm old school, is that it's all poor core and coordination, and it's just like it's not climbing. It's almost like a separate sport. So it would be nice if there was a blend of both where we call it rock climbing and it represents what climbing is. And I shouldn't say that because it's, if you're a 16-year-old kid right now, climbing is what it is that you're exposed to now. So I'm not
Yeah.
really fair to take that away from just so happens when you were born. But I think the climbing back then was a little more short-sighted in the sense of trying to like stump Chris and making it super hard. And the route setters were kind of gritty attitudes. I want to say they weren't as dope as the climbers, so they want to try to screw you over a little bit. I remember some wildest shit. Yeah, drilling a mono into the plywood, so you had to do this like move to a mono, and I'm just like, yo, man, why the hell are you doing this? Like, and having attitude and having a temper tantrum and taking all the holds from the comp and storing them in your hotel. Y'all know who I'm talking about. If you don't, then you don't. But um,
I don't. That cracks me up. But go on. You
yeah.
don't have to. You don't have to say anything
But
more.
no, it was like stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like the route setters had a personality themselves, and what they were trying to do is like debunk us as opposed to like make us look good and just like let the
Wow.
strongest climber win and then like make us look good. I mean, we did a good job of doing it, you know what I mean? But there was a certain element of the mentality. There was like a little bit of that mentality as well.
Damn, I actually had no idea about that, but totally makes sense where route setting was less of like a craft that people dedicate their lives to, and they were like removed from the climbers and just trying to, really focusing on that comp of like, let's not just make it a pass fail, but let's like showcase who the best climber is versus like, oh, I got beef with this guy or I can do this move. I bet you Chris can't or something. And that's interesting. Wow. I never
Yeah,
thought of that.
it wasn't as a performance as, and now it's more showcased as, we're in Olympics now. You can't be fucking around. Like
Yeah.
we got to put a show on. You know what I mean? So we it's not a successful comp if one person flashes everything and everybody else gets screwed. It's sports. It's drama. It's a story. It's visual. Yeah. So back then it wasn't any of that. But back then climbing wasn't a lot. We were, you know, guerrilla marketing and just rough around the edges and throwing crazy ass parties and staying up until 6 a.m. and just raging and just crazy shit.
Did you guys have any concept back then of around like maybe I shouldn't go to my project today because I'm hungover and I only got 2 hours of sleep? Or you guys just like whatever, we're going climbing, like who
I
cares?
mean, sometimes, I got to say there's been a couple times that I've gone to a comp, gone to an after party and sent the projects the next day. No pressure. You're not really thinking. You're a little cloudy. Your mini me is not on your shoulder, self doubting you. You're kind of just like, it's your project, so you rehearse the moves already. You know what I mean? You're familiar with it. You're not thinking. You're just executing. So in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
I mean, just a few cases. That's just a few. I mean, it wasn't like that all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think we didn't care. We just lived.
So, on that idea of just kind of showing up, giving it your best, whether you're hungover or not, like, what did it mean to, have success and be strong and compare yourself to others when there wasn't as much effort put in on the front end? It almost seems like that's what comps represent. It's like, we'll just show up and whatever happens, happens versus like, I'm going to train for 3 months and I'm going to be at my peak. And I don't know, like, did that transition ever happen where you started taking things, or maybe the whole community started taking things more seriously?
Absolutely. It was an evolution for sure. For sure. And that's when, after the PCAs were coming around and had a couple seasons, and then the ABS and the USA Climbing united, and then they were starting to be more serious and having more nationals. That was when I started, maybe, God, I don't want to date myself, but 03 or something like that. I remember I was living in Salt Lake, working for Pusher Cordless S7 and training my ass off. And I was training for a PCA comp that got canceled. But I was like doing 2-a-days. I was like watching my diet. I put a lot of effort into it. It was like the very, very, very first time I've ever put that much effort into it. And it got canceled, and I kind of got I got really upset because, you're training at the same gyms that these other guys are training, and then every training day is a competition, and you know where you're at. You know what I mean? And I was up there. And that opportunity got taken away. It got taken away. So I got super, I think that really influenced me more than now I admit it, but more than I would have liked to admit it back in the day. And I would have loved to have had a coach to talk me through that. I mean, I wasn't peaking. I was still in my recovery, but I was still climbing really hard to fill a void. But yeah, it got serious. And it went from rock star, just showing up, no training, to okay, this means something. You want to get your PCA card? Cool. Oh, this means something. I got to pay rent. Okay, cool. This means something. I got to pay insurance. I'm not going to get Western Union from my mom. I got to let's go. Or otherwise I got to teach more clinics, or, I lost my sponsorship from Boreal. Okay. And now I got to, how am I going to come up with the extra $800 a month? So for me, speaking from that era, it got serious. Yeah. Where things started meaning more.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting how when I think back to then, it was almost just like yelling at the crag may have been frowned upon. I feel like the telling someone that you were training was almost frowned upon. Like, it's very different to go to the gym and just climb with their buddies and like compete versus like taking the personal acknowledgement to be like, no, I'm trying hard right now with a goal in mind versus like,
Right.
I don't really care. So
Right.
it's a big shift, man.
Yeah, it was it was kind of it was yeah. Back then we were a bunch of knuckleheads. We just expected, we were all talented, but we didn't leverage it. You know what I mean? I mean, Chris didn't train. Like all those badasses never trained. They were just, well, don't get me wrong. I think the World Cups from the late 80s, early 90s, Yuji Hirayama, Francois Legrand, performance climbing classic. Those motherfuckers trained, but the American in the U.S., we were just kind of like. But no, I think the competition training I think sport climbing from the late 80s, early 2000s was very about training, almost to the point where steroids were controversial.
They were happening.
Not going to say any more than that. I think the bouldering, when we moved everything to bouldering and those competitions, we were still it was still an adolescent sport. still rock star, still rebellion. Like, yes. So bouldering didn't get serious with the training until mid 2000s, like 2005, 2006.
Well, this is exactly why Rampage was such a big deal for me and my generation is that I was looking at the people who came before and it was these hard training sport climbers and everything was dialed and these drop knees and this like almost dance. And so I had come out of gymnastics and gymnastics was very rigorous and more like that. It was like
Yeah.
point your toes, point your damn toes. And
Right.
then when you guys came along, it was like, yell, try hard, have fun. And it just felt if you're right, the American style of bouldering was not the same as that Arab came before. And so it really, you guys ushered in something as a very different from what came before. And it was infectious. It was fun, dude.
Yeah.
Rockstar. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But it wasn't on purpose. I think we were just doing, we were just, we were just doing us.
Yeah. It's funny how much success, all those names that you started calling out, all of them including you, just amazing climbers without hardcore training. And sometimes it just makes me wonder about the kids these days. And you got to have both. You got to have this like deep love. And then obviously to become the best you can be, you need to not just eat McDonald's every day and, you want to do some training. I just love, like, you guys had the soul for sure. And then maybe like we've headed too far in the other direction of like just I don't know brutal training and losing like the love and I feel like when those worlds meet is when climbing really gets pushed and it's beautiful too.
Yeah. Uh, and I think it's starting to move further and further and further away from each other. Um, I think in this day and age, if you're one of the top climbers, you can't be climbing V15 and still winning nationals or World Cups. I think it's too specialized. And I've seen it. I don't even think I know. I know. I mean, we can talk about some young kids and they're all talented, but the guys who are on podium or in the finals for a World Cup, they're not climbing outside. Maybe a little bit, but they're not trying to go do a V15 or V16 and then training for a World Cup for 2 weeks and then trying to get on podium. They get smoked. Like talent don't take you there anymore. You gotta be refined. It's talent and work ethic. You gotta pick your poison because you can't. It's too different. It's different. No matter how you want to look at it, whatever you want to say, you don't see those guys that are podiuming them on World Cups. Yeah, they can probably do the V15, but there's not enough time to put energy into that because they got to make podium to the next World Cup. And they're probably sponsored by their country. So you ain't messing around. You ain't fucking around. You're not going to, and there's no down season because those guys that are doing bouldering are also doing sport.
Yeah.
And then now you're training on a 4-year cycle because you're trying to make it to the Olympics. So where's the time? So with that being said, they got it worse than we did. We just had fun.
Yeah, my pushback on that, Obi, is like just like you guys were literally giving the middle finger to the trad climbers on the Chief while you guys were on the boulders down below and like being like, why are you guys up there swinging around on ropes? Like, let's have fun down here. Those guys indoors are on, their comp problems go, why are you going outside and getting all dirty
Right.
and like grabbing sharp grips?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it's good times in here.
What are the conditions what are the conditions at the gym this day? What's the humidity? What's the humidity at the gym?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's all different, but that's just basically that's what I'm saying is that it's just like separated and it's like it's different sports now.
Really is. But that's cool too. I don't know.
No, I don't.
Like more.
I'm not dissing it by any means. I'm just acknowledging that it's like that's because I try to coach, and I coach, you know, I try to mentor for kids that are trying to climb outside and create their brand and create their business, and they may want to have me train them for indoor, and I'm like, yo, man, it's like we got to put more time.
Well, it is interesting thinking about if you're coming up now and let's say you clearly have just the talent and let's say you have the work ethic, you kind of get to choose a bunch of different paths that weren't there before. You could be a sport climber outdoors, you could be an indoor boulder, you could be a trad climber or like some kind of alpine mix of all those
Yeah,
too. And like
absolutely.
that's special,
No,
man. It
that's
used
super
to be,
dope.
yeah, it didn't used to be like that.
No, but yeah, you could do a bunch of different facets of the disciplines.
So you got to have your hands in more than just climbing. And we said something about like pusher. You say cordless too. I like tell me about some of the different jobs that you had over the years and what was like really fun to do, outside of just climbing.
Yeah. Well, in terms of jobs and just like, or let's just not say jobs, but experiences.
Okay, okay, that sounds much more fun.
But yeah, as a climber and being fortunate and lucky, I was able to meet a bunch of the pros and or the people I looked up with, the like iconic legends. And I got first introduced to a little bit of shoe design with John Backer and Boreal. Um, and being that Boreal was like the main staple shoe back in the day, like Jerry wore it, Ben wore it, Yuji wore it, Lynn wore it, like Backer
Which
wore it.
ones which ones did you love? I
I
because I that was my first pair
So
of
I
shoes.
used to rock the Stingers.
Nice,
Um,
dude.
and then I
Yes.
also had the Matrix, was based on a Stinger last without the insole, and it was a super soft shoe. But I used to get that shoe. Backer used to let me get. I could order shoes through him, and he would get them handmade. I would have stiff Matrix, um, which it was based off of the Laser line. I don't know how far back with the shoes, but like
I did, yeah.
so I was able to toy with all of those shoes and just kind of customize my own kind of shoes. I remember being in England. We were filming Frequent Flyers with Boone and Mike, and we were staying at Jerry's house, and he gave me a pair of Stingers that had stealth on those shoes. I'm
Interesting.
not gonna say any more, but I think that was a common thing back in the day. Like the athletes never the, their tools had to work. But
Okay, can you describe what the Stinger was and why it was such a big deal back then?
Stinger was a dope color shoe. It was yellow and black, a lace up, and it did have a bit of a, even though Mad Rock kind of came out with it first, but it did have like a little bit of a concave. It was a flat shoe, but it had like this little. It placed your feet in a position to be in a really powerful position where you can actually kind of like when you get to a certain point in climbing, as people, as the audience may know or whatever, like you're not standing like this. You're actually kind of like you're
Grabbing. Yeah.
pulling. And
Yeah,
that
pulling.
was the shoe that kind of like had that prosthetic like little molded thing in there. And it was a lace up. And although it's not convenient, but I'm a true believer that if you really want a high performance shoe, it's got to be lace. That's just my opinion. You just get more control. You can tighten it. It grows with you as it stretches. You still got it. You can do that with Velcro and whatnot, but getting all the way down to your toes with the laces. But but yeah, that was like my first introduction with the whole shoe and the design stuff was with Backer. And I wasn't designing. I was just asking. He was just like, "Oh, try this, try this, try this." But yeah, I was sponsored by Boreal USA. I don't know if he's still alive anymore. Steve Law, he was like the owner of Boreal USA. John Backer hooked me up with that contract. I was able to bring Jason Kale. He sponsored Jason Kale also. We had a couple print pages in the magazines. I think Jason did Evolution in Boreals. If you're not, he was definitely working it in them.
Okay.
Um, so anyway, that was like
Oh, that's
a
good.
whole little tangent.
Well, I remember seeing my first pair of Boreal Stingers and they blew my mind. They just looked like nothing I'd ever seen before.
Yeah,
They were really uncomfortable because I wasn't used to having a downturn and like that asymmetrical, that like really, yeah, pointed. And I should shout out Kenny Suh, CEO of Mad Rock now, actually is the reason we're chatting today. So thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, no
You
doubt.
guys had bumped into each other, and just hearing about that early shoe design stuff is, I don't know, man. It was a that whole thing was a big change in
And
climbing. That
climbing,
downturn
yeah.
grabbing, so
And what is
different.
that?
So
The Mirage, the La Sportiva Mirage that looked like a banana shoe. Freaking Jason would rock that
yes,
shit, and it would like I tried it on. I think that's when they kind of introduced the edgeless technology with that shoe. That's a DDA. That's a DDA Rabbitoo. That's a DDA Rabbitoo design. That's his. Yeah,
really,
that's yeah.
huh.
He can't. He that was his first. Yeah, he came up with that. But anyway, yeah, nice segue because you know what, like design and shoe design was something that I was really interested in. And I think unknowingly, once again, I was being kind of trained prior to working with Mad Rock because I came on board with Mad Rock in 09, in 2001. And at that time, the person that had Kenny's position at that time was this guy, Joe Garland. And if you know, you know. But I was one of the first athletes for Mad Rock at that time. And then fast forward, yeah, I started designing. I stopped coaching. I kind of burnt out of coaching. I left Boulder, Colorado, and I've always been associated with Mad Rock. I remember I scheduled like 20 clinics in a week. I went to go visit LA and did 20 clinics in a week in SoCal for Mad Rock and for myself. And we did really well. And I went to a trade show right after. I like coordinated it. And that was like always like my hustle. Like I'd always try to like make it. If you're gonna pay for me to do a trip to come out to a trade show, I might as well come a week early and try to like make some money. But anyway, yeah, I was interested in design, and I think I was able to speak the language where I showed Kenny a bunch of my drawings and my concepts, and he set up a meeting at the trade show with Young Chu, and I showed Young, and we were chatting. He was like, let's I was living in Boulder, but he was like, let's bring him out. Let's get him designing. And
Tell me about some of those shoes you were helping out with.
well, I was doing a bunch of color schemes for a bunch of the shoes that were currently at that time that were in production. But my shoe is the red line, the original red
Nice.
line, not the Velcro red line. But that was like I just want to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
But I
get it.
was working on a bunch of stuff. I worked on an introduction, like an intro shoe for beginners called the Pulse Positive and Negative, and I think that was the first introduction to low volume, high volume shoes, flat out. There
Whoa,
was that
whoa! I'm surprised.
yeah, and
Just like, yeah.
it was a huge concept. The shoe was a blue shoe and a red shoe, blue pill, red pill, kind of like however you want to play it. There was a local retail store that was fired up, Gear Co-op. They developed like this app that you can answer a bunch of questions. It'll spit out the best pulse, positive or negative that you want based off of whether you want comfort or performance. Um, Worked on a couple crash pads. Some things came out, some things didn't.
Yeah, you said something about like colors and even just that whole like you're joking around about like red pill, blue pill, and what was climbing like as far as people caring about what the color of their shoes were, what they were wearing. Like, cause I feel like now, I mean, dude, like there's whole brands that just, it's like all about like the t-shirts that they drop that are limited release. But I don't know if I remember, I was too young. Like,
To care.
did people, yeah, well, it's like my mom, it's like what my mom gonna buy me,
Yeah.
like just,
I
but yeah, what was that like back
That
then?
was the beginning. I mean, I think that's when like so like in Kenny's interview, like yeah, Mad Rock was always associated with the affordable, not as dope, whatever. Go back and watch that segment. But we always had a reputation, and what I always wanted to do when getting there was like, yo, we're fucking dope, yo. We're doper than this. Like,
Yeah.
we got the founder who kind of started this shit with before anybody. Like, let's just freaking leverage this and like, yeah, we could be affordable, but let's fucking be dope. Like, let's freaking be edgy. Let's be awesome. Like, we could do this. So the color schemes, that was like an easy fix because that's just materials and whatever. But then, like when I was doing my shoe, the red line, at that time, I really wanted to make the $200. I wanted to break the $200 threshold. I was like, why does Scarpa or La Sportiva got to be these guys? We could be these guys. We got the technology. And then that's when I was trying to like, I really grabbed a lot of inspiration from the Jordans and the buying experience that you do when you go to buy an iPhone, and the packaging and the whole lead up towards it, and the whole building this whole like suspense and this whole like, holy shit, Mad Rock doesn't normally do this stuff. What the hell do they got underneath their sleeves? And I was like the spearhead, I was like the head of, doing this stuff. And it was just like, we were getting into waters that Mad Rock has never really got into in terms of like, I don't want to say coolness, but like having the innovation and the technology match up with being dope. I came up with the tagline defined by passion. Like we would have like these meetings and just like coming up with like, yo, what are we doing? Like how do we get rid of this stigma and like replant ourselves as being like a leading brand? And then not to cut you off, but like we were ahead of our time. It was ahead because now Kenny's doing like now, you know what I mean? But I talk to Kenny regularly, like now, because you can have a vision, but the market has to be able to accept it too. You know what I mean? And like you said, people weren't ready about caring what their shoes look like. They were worried about whether they're soft or stiff or,
Well, that was what I was kind of getting into, is like, you definitely seem to have like a style and a brand. Like you're just outspoken. You're like, this is me. And, and you were the cool urban kid, but like bringing that to design and stuff and having that influence, like that's what I mean. I was like, I don't really remember people thinking about what color the shoes would be. Like it just, I feel like that's somewhat new. And by the way, I just got to tell you, I was giving Kenny crap about highlighting Young Chu more, because when he like shared with me this article that was written on Young Chu, I was like, oh, dude, this guy is badass.
No,
like, bring him into the conversation.
He's gangster, yo. He's not even, you don't even know. Like you got to hang out with him. You know what I mean? At the end of my time designing at Mad Rock, I was slated to be production. I got brought out to Vietnam to hang out with Young and learn. I was going to take over. Like, he's been talking about retiring forever, but like I was slated to like, I wasn't coaching anymore. I wasn't climbing like that, it was another chance for me to reinvent myself with something that I was like super interested in. But yeah, I had to leave because I ended up getting a really, really big offer to coach and come back to the East Coast. So, I wasn't formally trained as a designer. Everything was self-taught. Mad Rock's a mom and pop business at the end of the day. And I remember having dinner with Young, and he's like, Obe, you're a good designer, but you're a really, really famous coach. And I was like, all right, man. And I really wanted to stay, I was scraping.
All right. Well, Obe, it's going to be awkward because this was not supposed to be a big Mad Rock advertisement, but just wanted to shout out Kenny. And now I don't even know if you know that Mad Rock does support the podcast. They're one of the main sponsors. So they're going to be very happy that you said all these good things about them.
Like I said, I speak with Kenny pretty regularly, and we have some things up our sleeve, just a FYI. So.
Okay. Well, that was a fun trip down shoe world, but yeah, any other area? We can totally talk about coaching, but what was it like being at Pusher? Did you work at Pusher ever?
Yeah. I used to pour holds and I used to stuff pads for Pusher Cordless S7. It was a conglomerate of the three. Shout out to Clark Shelk and Boone and Mike Call. And Yeah,
Damn. Oh,
worked.
geez.
Yeah, worked with Ben Moon, and he had a designer named Sam that came in with all the dope S7 gear that we used to rock. All that stuff. Me wearing all those hats back in the day. But yeah, I lived with Clark Shelp, founder of Cordless, and that's the thing. Like I was a pro, but I was working, man. I was pouring holds, like yeah, pouring holes from the bucket, like wearing like yeah, like ugh. And
It's good that you don't have to do that
pads.
anymore.
Yeah, no doubt,
Dude,
stuffing
they
pads. And
they now they have full factories for pouring holds. That was a good thing to outsource to someone professional because yeah, that was a gnarly process.
oh my god. So I mean, I'm wondering if I have some of the effects now with some of the chemicals or whatnot, you know. But partially joking, but a little serious. But yeah, I used to make custom holds for Pusher. Like I would take the molds and then like stuff like some toilet paper on the corners or whatnot, just to make like the boss like a different shape, or like the pinch packs or whatever, like yeah, or the cobbles. Like I would like alter them for comps, so the cats wouldn't have been able. Well, I end up seeing them, but um, they would get used for comps.
Oh, dude, can you tell me about the boss and why that was a big deal and or at least in my memory, the boss was a very big deal of a hold when that came out.
Oh, absolutely. Not anymore because it's evolved so much. But the boss was the most famous hold in the world. Um, Flat out, simple. Just speaking simple. Pusher brought slopers indoors. Simple. They brought slopers and pinches and these uncomfortable cobblestones that are just like they brought the granite holds indoors. It was like Boone was just breaking foam and just having like a jagged edge and then like shaping the other side. But the boss was iconic. It just represented, it was ahead of its time, and it represented our era. It was cutting edge. It represented doing crazy ass shit. Double dynos off of it. Stephen Jeffries freaking grabbing it and jumping, like yeah. And it was influenced by Fontainebleau. I mean, it was a complete Fontainebleau replica. Shout out to Mark Russo, who actually designed it. That I don't know if anybody's gonna know who that is, but
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is so the two things I remember is that it was a sloper. And like you're saying, I love how you just broke it down. Like Pusher brought slopers and pinches. And I figured that the boss was, oh, it was also big. It was
yeah,
also freaking big.
the ship must have weighed like 60 pounds, and it was solid. It
Not
wasn't
hollow.
It wasn't
Yeah.
cavity. It wasn't cavity back. It was a bitch. I mean, I used to try. Yeah, we used to. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I assumed it was based off of Fontainebleau. Was it like a trip that they took? Like, do you know anything about that Genesis story of
Not
the shaping?
nothing other than what I told you. I know Mark Russo went out. He's a Jersey guy. Worked for Smack Magazine. You remember that shit?
No, no.
Okay.
My mom wouldn't buy me something called Smack
It was
magazine back
online.
then.
It was online. It was
Okay.
online. Was it Smack? Anyway, but yeah, I think it was conceived. Like he went on a trip to Fontainebleau first time and came back and was living in he moved from New Jersey to Salt Lake City and got connected with Pusher and yeah. And I mean, they just made that, and then I remember it would blow everybody's mind. Like we would take seasons to get used to it as it was normal. And then setters started setting with it upside down. And then we were just like, oh my gosh, what the hell? But yeah.
God, it just made such an impression on me because just crimps were everywhere. And I was like a kid too. And I feel like when you're a kid, edges just make sense and you have small hands. And you're just like, oh, yeah, of course. And then this sloper thing, I always think of slopers. I shouldn't say this, but I always think of them as kind of like grown up holds. Like there's something about the body tension you need.
And you got to have a big hand.
Yeah. But like it required a different kind of technique than like jumping and latching always to these little holds. And it just, when we had one, I don't know, it completely changed my perception of how climbing could be. It really blew my mind.
Yeah, and your gym probably only had one, and you ran like 10 routes. You probably set like 10 boulders or 10 routes through it. with the tape.
So much tape.
You would be
So much tape.
have like 8 different tags of tape, but it's the one hold that was like the centerpiece of this because everybody wanted to get a piece of it. That too, I have really small hands, so like Technic too. They when they came out with those really fat pinches, I felt like I wasn't able to. I had a hard time with those big fatties with Technic.
They're literally called
fatties.
Yeah.
I used to get the shit end on the stick when it came to those holds in competition because I can only grab them at the bottom or the top, but that's not where they were the best. So I could just, but yeah.
Okay, shoes, holds, pads. Actually, let's just stop on pads for a moment. Cordless pads, the luxury pads of the day. Didn't they have like corduroy on top or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any comments about pads and like the role that they played and how many you guys had and how expensive they were and the safety aspect compared to today?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have many. I mean, and the ones in the early days, they weren't really that good. They were not hurting any feelings. This is facts. They were kind of shit. You bought them out. But no, I mean, Cordless Revolution, like they made pads what they were. I mean, there was this company. Well, Metolius made pads early in the day, and there was this other company, Kula. I can't remember. They came out with crash pads, so they were ahead of the game. But Clark took it over. He started Cordless. He would load up his van, head down to Waco around the same time that we were doing Free Waco and the year before, and just like sell out of seconds and just like put it on the map. I mean, there's old heads that are like, yo, I still got that cordless pad. I've given all mine away. I've always played it forward, but yeah, I mean, that opened up the endless possibilities. And when you had one, they were expensive. So you or your friend only had one. But then once it started becoming like a thing, then I had one, you had one. Now we can go do this other highball. Now we can go do this climb that's a little kind of messed up, And then now I got 2 and you got 2. And then we got another buddy who comes on and he gets one. You know what I mean? So then it started to turn like into this thing where you're just laying out your landing zone to try to be as safe as possible. And then it got crazy and people stashing pads. But
what did you guys think of? So bouldering relatively new, crash pads relatively new. How did you guys feel about tall lines, and were you attracted to them? Did they always hold something special, or was bouldering just more about movement? Like what was the relationship there?
It was a little bit of both. And I think me personally, I was never motivated by the high tall lines. As we were talking about before, I was like an emotional climber, and you got to have your shit together when you're up there. So I would never really mess with it. So I'd always focus on the lower stuff. But it was a little bit of both, and it was a little bit of outlining your identity with who you are. Like if you're one of these guys, like riding lightning, man. Or if you want to ride a bull, man. If you want to do a big wave, I mean, some of my best friends were the dopest at it for sure, But yeah, I mean, I think that it went to everybody bouldering, and then it just got taller, to the point where I don't even know if it's called bouldering anymore. Like, I mean, you're not, now you're soloing.
Were you surprised when Jason Cale did Evolution? Was that kind of like a defining moment?
I wasn't surprised. I was like I was proud of him for him. But I was happy because it was one of my buds that were just like pushing the limit. And it was just like you interview Josh, and there's that deep water soloing that Chris did. What is it? Pontus or whatever? What is it?
Pontus.
Yeah. Evolution was that before that. And I don't care. I can argue with anybody, old and young, whatever you want to say. I've been around the game forever, but evolution for back in the day was that before that.
I mean, I dare anyone to walk up to Bishop. Well, first of all, when you drive up and you see it, it blows your mind.
Can you even get in anymore? Like, but yes, it looks fake. It's like when I went to Yosemite for the first time, Chris took me there. We showed up that night. We camped out in his truck, wake up in the morning. I'm like, is this even freaking real? You know, like going to a place like that. But yeah, Grandma Peabody is just like, what the, I remember being up there with him a couple times when he was like first like inspired to do this thing. And I was like, damn, motherfucker, you crazy, man. But you got it.
Yeah, it was a really pivotal moment in my climbing when I actually first saw it and then heard about the video and watched the video of Jason doing that. And we talked to, or when I talked to Josh Lowe about this in general, like seeing stuff like that made me really think that climbing, or specifically bouldering, I was like, holy shit, bouldering is badass. Because I came from a bit more of a sport climbing background.
Yeah.
But then seeing Jason do that, I was like, this is more badass. Like, I don't know. It just is, dude. Especially back then too. Especially you go there now, by the way, dude. Yeah. You have to wait in line, but there'll be like literally 30 pads there.
Which is nice, literally. Because he didn't do he didn't do it with that many pads. That wasn't, which is nice. But I mean, it's changed, now it's an accomplishment to do it to the lip. And then, it's changed. Or doing dream time from the stand up. Like, what does that mean? Come on, doggy. Like, come on, son.
So, dude, I just had this conversation. I don't know if it was with Will, maybe it was Will Englund or maybe it's Carlo Traversi. I don't know. They were talking about dream time and they're like, yeah, the stand is BS. And I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know I thought that was a line before the sick got done. And so, I was confused. But
man, no. And that's so funny because Carlo, shout out to Carlo. He's dope. He's like, yeah, he's a baller too. I've had an opportunity. I worked with him for a little bit in South Africa, but he's awesome. But yeah, you got to trust what he says because, he wrote it.
Been there, done that.
He wrote it as much as, he wrote it and acted in it. Good people, man. Good people.
It is funny how people take these climbs and then sometimes like chunk them up to get like a taste of it. And I can see it both ways where, I don't know, like maybe you don't want to risk your leg on the top of Evolution, but maybe you want to get a taste of what it was like to be Jason and get on that lip. And I'll tell you what, man, when you get to that lip and when you pull over that lip, it is an entirely different world.
Yeah. Yo, it's basically, if I was going to sum it up, and I've tried it a few times and I've never gotten to the lip because I've always been scared. But climbing the bottom half is like climbing in the gym. Once you turn that lip, welcome to the late 80s, early 90s, because you're about to you're going to be puckering. You're welcome to climbing some trad and keep your head together.
Well, this is what I like hearing the early days and hearing about the gear, because what I always say is that what gear does is it often allows people to do more wild stuff, like what Jason did. Like you're saying, that was the S Pontus of its time, but now people do more dangerous stuff, but they often use more gear to make stuff safer, or techniques like
working.
But like people, it's not like Jason wasn't as bold as the new climbers now. It's just they were working from different gear, different techniques, and so you got to pay homage to it, and also you got to use that to see maybe what's going to come next too, and be like, oh, who knows what's next.
I mean, when you were growing up, did you have a dial-up phone, like a rotisserie phone when you were younger?
I did.
All right.
Rotisserie.
Rotary.
That was hilarious.
Phone. Yeah. All right. Well, now they got cell phones now. So that's the analogy for that, like that's, rotisserie phone. That's right. Rotary phone.
It makes sense. It still makes sense. Uh, uh, so you took your dream job, or maybe not your dream. You had a great offer hanging out at Mad Rock. You had an even better offer, you lucky guy. And you moved into coaching. Are you still mainly doing coaching now, Obi?
No, I'm not coaching at all anymore. But at that time, it was important for me to move back to my family. I wanted to be back to closer to the East Coast. You know, I left the East Coast and was in Boulder for a good stint, and then I was in Colorado, Boulder, and then LA for a good stint, and then it just came down to financial and money. So I had to take the job, and it wasn't, two birds, one stone. I was able to be closer to my family, and that was a good time. I was still sharp with the coaching, and climbing competing hadn't changed that much to what it is now. But it was good. I had a good crew, had a bunch of great kids, had some successful seasons. Um, but no, I'm not coaching anymore. That's not true. I do very, very, very little amount of coaching right now. I do a handful of privates here and there. I work with Austin Hoyt's girlfriend, Sari. So I've been working with her on trying to figuring some things out. And then I was working with Austin for a little while. Now it's just mentoring, more chatting, and just trying to plan out the future, help him plan out, just he bats his thoughts. But for me, coaching, I don't know. It's tough. It's changed. The sport's changed. The kids changed. Sensitivities changed. The parents changed. The facilities changed. I I'm I'm kind of open minded. I think I'm pretty open minded. Maybe not so much when it comes to rock climbing, but I feel like I deserve that. But I don't want to. Yeah, I don't. It's changed.
This is a deeper question. I don't know. There's no easy answer to this, so I'm just gonna toss it out there.
Throw it
You said
out.
you're open book.
Hail
So
Mary.
maybe it's because it's something that I've wrestled with too. And even though I was never great or never one of the top dogs by any stretch of the imagination, definitely always a B player, C player, D player. But something that I struggled with and still struggle with is letting go of not being the one in the arena. Like, it's like, I know you want to win the comp, just like we were saying, like you want to be the guy. And then, you've, were one of the people who designed, then you were a coach. Like, what was that transition like? How do you deal with not being like vying for the top spot and instead just being part of the community?
I think that's a challenge. I mean, it's different because there's player coach and then there's coach. You know what I mean? Like,
No, tell me more.
player coach is like somebody who's lived it. So like, there's a lot of coaches in this industry right now, climbing coaches, that they don't. They tell you what isolation is. They've never lived it as an athlete in isolation. They know what the chair is and not looking and having to turn around 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off. I got that in my head. Like, you know what I mean? They're great coaches. Don't get me wrong, mentors, helping kids out. But the player coach learned how to be about it. They've been involved in it. For that, speaking for myself, it is challenging because, yeah, I want my kids to freaking whoop ass. Like, I want them to find themselves, and it's a little fine line because I get happy and reminiscent of how it feels. And some coaches do it for the wrong reasons because of that. Like, they're coaching to try to live through that kid as opposed to like fostering and nurturing and teaching a kid how to be themselves, essentially. But yeah, I kind of got lost.
Yeah, I mean, the even just you may have gotten lost, but I was asking about what it's like to make that transition. But you can see even just when you're talking about it, you have a lot of psych, and you got stuck in what it's like to be a coach in your head, and being excited for it. And I just like, for me, I get this question sometimes from people who they're getting older. They're like, okay, it's starting to dawn on me that perhaps I'm not going to be the first one to climb V18, or I'm not going to be the one who does the next S Pontus or whatever. And just like, making that transition from not being the best in the world to supporting the best in the world. I think it's a hard transition, man. You're young, you're ambitious, and then you go, wait, like I don't know, I have to find my next chapter in this world.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I mean, I I kind of feel bad. They only have one trick. I mean, if you get to the if you're 26 years old, 28 years old, and you've been climbing hard for your whole life, and you're trying to do the first V18, and you're not, you got to come up with a couple other tricks, man. You've been in climbing and that much. Has that? It's unfortunate for those guys because is that all that climbing taught them?
Hmm.
You know, like, is that all that climbing has taught you? Is that you just want to do this number or you just want to be a pro? Why don't you try to do that number, try to be a pro, try to be an influencer, try to be a motivator, try to be a mentor, try to be a designer?
Well, I always think that one of the reasons why it's so important to strive for something, whatever it may be, is that the process of really getting to be at the top of your own personal game and whatever thing, we'll just say climbing because it's a climbing podcast,
Yeah.
uh, that you learn a lot about what the world is like and what it takes to do your best in anything. And so you know, I would hope that anyone who is really diving deep into themselves and bringing out the best themselves, that then you can transition to something because you know what it takes to be
You could
excellent and
pivot.
you've got it.
You could
You
pivot.
can, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard mentally. Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on my third or fourth, my third or fourth uh, round or whatever.
That's fun though too.
No, I mean I've been able to make the best. Yeah, it's unfortunate, you know. I'm lucky. I'm freaking lucky.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's unfortunate is that it'd be nice to be 20 years old and for the rest of your life, strong, strong as can be, never can get injured, cruising around with your butts. I shouldn't say that. Actually, I love each chapter of life, and but it is sometimes you look back and you go like, yeah, it was good times.
I always enjoyed more more so than being 20 was being like in my early 30s, still being strong, maybe not as strong as a 20-year-old, and just freaking old men like whooping their ass, just being like, you know why? Because you're just a young buck, you don't even know, like you don't even know, like
What are those tricks that the young 30-year-old may have acquired over the 20-year-old?
um yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate, but we're gonna say it anyway. So you ever heard that story about the bull and the baby bull and the dad bull?
Nope.
Anyway, so they're on the top of a hill, and there's a whole bunch of female cows at the bottom in the valley. And the baby bull says, "Hey, Dad, let's go run down there right now and get one of those females." And then the dad says, "No, son, let's just go walk down there and get them all." I don't even know if it makes any sense, but just yeah, wiser,
Sounds
wiser.
like yeah. It sounds, if that doesn't make sense to you, maybe you just have to wait until you're in your early
You
30s.
got it's age appropriate.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good, dude. Well, before I let you go, I gotta ask you what some of your either top memories in climbing are, or favorite climbs that you've done. Just like, when I ask you that and you look back, like, what is a climb that jumps out in your head? Like whether it's because it was so fun or because it meant something to you, like just take me to one or two top moments
It's
for you.
yeah. I mean, I think it's been well documented, but I think that time that I did Flying Marcel was like a huge moment in my life. Um, Before I went to Waco, I was climbing in the East Coast in the Gunks, and I was raw talent, but just didn't know how to succeed, didn't know how to send. And then that trip with the people there, Jason was around at that time, but like I had this mentor, Jordan Mills, and that whole I learned how to be a little segue, but I learned how to be from a good climber to a great climber.
Ooh,
I'm
ooh,
sorry. I'm
You should be a
sorry.
podcaster,
I'm
dude. You
sorry.
got. All right. Well, what do you mean then, Obi? How do you go from good to great?
Shit, man. Climbing is like, yeah, it's like playing chess. It's like gymnastics, self expression. It's like dance. If you can take all the shit that you've gone through that holds you back and still push forward, you're on your way. And two, if you want to be great, if you want to be dope, surround yourself with dope and great people.
All right, man. Well, until next time, and I will link Rampage in the notes because we talked about it so much. And I gotta tell you, I'm playing golf tomorrow.
Oh,
So
nice.
just
Nice.
I'm gonna channel you pointing your golf club at the chief and play my old man sport. Good stuff, man.
Awesome, bud. Well, thank you for having me, Josh.
My pleasure.
Cool.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like even more content, go to patreon.com/testpiece. And while you're at it, share this podcast with someone you know who would love it. And please leave us a review or rating at wherever you get your podcasts. We've also got tons of great content on YouTube and Instagram, so don't forget to like and subscribe there. Okay, see you next week.